This is not a message for everyone. This is a transmission for the starseeds, for those of you who know or suspect that you are something different, something unusual, not of this place. These are the messages for you that I, as the host of the MaxAnte, are bringing to you. Don't expect anything here to make a lot of sense. Everything is entirely paradoxical and is for you to interpret and for you to discern what is true. 7 steps to being fully in the world. Well, we've gone through 5 of the key steps so far, and the first 3, as I've said, are the primary ones to focus on for just being in the world. The first being grounding yourself in your body, becoming fully empowered in the world, in the human society, healing yourself, transforming yourself, everything entailed in that. If you haven't listened to these earlier episodes, go and do that. And the second step was just being a bit lighter about the whole experience, realizing that you're on a tour here, that this is a temporary situation, being alive. You've got, on average, people are given roughly like 100 years. You maybe get more than that. And in the next episode, we're going to talk about actually even what could be beyond that in the next 7th final step. But for the average person, this is the average life, and they kind of relate to it like that they're going to have it forever, that even this is almost like a dress rehearsal and they're going to get to their real life soon. No, this is it. This is all you are. This is who you are, even though you're no one. We're going to talk more about that as well. But this whole experience of realizing that this is a tour here on Earth, that's the second step. And the third step of being joyous, of orientating your whole life in the direction of joy. And every experience, every relationship, every action, every job, location is all a litmus test to how much joy you're experiencing. And so you keep pivoting and orientating and changing your life in the direction of more and more joy. And the 4th step was to, once you've got your cup full of joy, you are now experiencing joy. After that authentic integration, you start sharing that joy. A lot of people mix it around the other way. They try to share themselves, help others, while they're actually often depleted and exhausted. And that's not the way to go. The first step, because it's your birthright, it's basically being here in the world, is to experience joy. And to allow that to be the orientation, it's the indicator. So it's not that anything is wrong, and it's not that anything is bad when you're not experiencing joy. It's just that's the indicator. Hey, this isn't the right path to go down. You go over here, go in this direction, and you keep testing and experimenting until you experience more and more joy. And then with that, you now have the capacity to share that joy. And so that was the 4th step. And so that's kind of going to be a lot. That could be somebody's whole lifetime, just going through those 3 or 4 steps there. But if somebody wanted to do something radical, if they wanted to really dive deep, because these are the 7 steps to being fully here in the world, to understand the totality of the situation. This is not some step-by-step program to just have a good life. That's just the first step. That's it. The first step, and maybe the second and third. But really, the first step is just about having a good time here. The 5th step is where you transcend all of that. The 5th step is about awakening to the truth, the deepest truths of who you are, what this is here. And this is not necessarily for everyone. Not everybody even wants to do that, because if you've gone and listened to my episode, it can be pretty terrifying, because one of the things to encounter is that there is no control and no truth to the identity that typically people, and maybe you, cling to. The belief structures. There's no truth to the belief structures. There's no truth to any of this. So people build their personalities around belief structures and around relationships and around identifications with their body, with themselves, with what they think the world is. All of this is identification, and there's no truth to those things. So the awakening process is realizing that there is no truth to the foundations that people have about everything, about even all of society. So it's really about tearing through all of that, upending one's entire world, and completely surrendering. So that fifth step is about profoundly letting go and letting life take you. Just take you all the way over the edge. A full awakening, a full letting go into whatever is revealed. So now what could be beyond that? Well, you'd have to sort of say that after that experience, you're not really considered normal, because now you've stepped beyond the confines of normal society, of even being a normal human. Now you've transcended that. Your whole way of viewing life is not the way everybody else is. Everybody else is clinging together, and that makes them society, and they're clinging to, most fundamentally, to themselves, to they're holding themselves and their identity so near and dear, and there is a lot of fear wrapped up in that. So this fifth step is about transcending fear, because if you're willing to let go of yourself, which is a death, if you're willing to step into the abyss and just slide all the way, then you're not going to be normal as other people would consider you after that. This is going to happen to people anyway. This is going to happen to you anyway. See, that's the crazy thing, is people spend their whole life with the brakes on, trying to avoid the awakening. They're trying to avoid death. I'm not saying that death is an awakening. It could be, because I did actually have that near-death experience. I did actually, in a way, die, and I talk about that in that fifth episode, and I'm going to be exploring that much more in later episodes, because there was a lot more that even happened there. I'll go through all that later on. So once you've had this breakthrough, this death experience of the ego, perhaps even a near-death experience, once you've encountered beings beyond this dimension, it has gives you a radically different perspective to what this whole thing is. And so once you've crossed over, and then presumably, like as in my case, returned. Something returned. It wasn't the same being as it was before, that's for sure. So then what? Well, then there's this new experience of being alive. Like I can tell you, my next months after that experience with the toad sacred medicine, I didn't understand why I was alive, because I didn't understand how there could still be life after that. It was such a peculiar experience to die and then return, and then to realize that there was no truth in identity, that the ego was fictitious. To realize that completely profoundly, and then to still be here was and being such a radically fast experience was quite disorientating. That was my experience for months. And then I just realized that it was so funny, that it was all a joke, and I just started laughing. I just started laughing all the time after that. So it was disorientating at first, and then it was just really funny. Really funny to be alive, really funny to be here. That the whole thing was peculiar and funny, that everybody was taking it so seriously. They were taking themselves and their life so seriously. Like it was as though they thought that there was something to hold on to, something to believe in, something to be in the world. And so after that, all these transmissions started to come through all the time, as I would go on even more sacred medicine journeys, more encounters with the toad medicine, more encounters with DMT, and so forth, because now there wasn't the fear of death anymore, and now there was a continual death process. Constantly the ego was dying all the time, and then re-emerging. The identity would come back. So it's like, oh, look, now there's a thought process again of believing that there is somebody here, but it couldn't maintain its form because it had been seen through. So the identity was forming, but it was so lightly held because I couldn't believe in myself anymore. There was nothing to believe in. And so with the transmissions coming through and the messages, they were sharing with me that it was very important for me to then share this, which is what's happening now. So I started the process a couple of years ago by writing my books, and I've written a lot of these books. But then life has a way of getting busy, and they were communicating with me telling me. So that's the thing, then starting to live from instructions, completely surrendering the messages. To share this was very important. And so, like, this is now like about more than 4 years ago. And so I spent quite a while writing, and then that stopped for a while. So I'm going to finish those books, and they will be released. But then, just a couple of weeks ago, a very dear friend of mine who was there with me on one of these amazing DMT medicine journeys, he just rang me very late at night and told me to start putting these out there, to start recording, to not wait until the books are finished. And so that's actually what this 6th step is about, is once you've crossed over, once you've experienced what is beyond the normal human experience of believing in oneself, believing in identity, once that is transcended, then it could be a 6th step of sharing that, of teaching, or whatever you want to refer to it. So this 6th step is about bringing back to the world, bringing back to the human society what has been learned, what has been transmitted. So, like, even in the story of the Buddha, when he first awoke on that full moon night under the Bodhi tree, and he awakened and he saw through all of the delusions of reality, he saw through that there was no truth to himself, he had that profound experience. And then very quickly he had this next thought that was, no one's going to believe this. This is far too subtle. No one will grasp this. And so he contemplated and decided to just remain there and stay there in the forest, fully enjoying his awakening, fully enjoying his enlightenment. It took one of the gods, one of the top gods in the whole universe, who came down to him and pleaded with him to start teaching and sharing. And the Buddha rejected him. He rejected a god and said, no one's going to understand this. Not even you gods and angels will understand this teaching. And he pleaded and shared that yes, some beings will understand this. And so eventually, through coaxing, he convinced the Buddha, after he'd stayed in the forest for more than 40 days, to leave and go out and teach. And so that's what he did, obviously, and that's how we have the Buddha's teachings. And we're going to look more at some of those in the future episodes. So one of my first thoughts as I arrived in the world for the first time on that day in Tulum in February of 2015, as everything came rushing back and the formation of thought processes began, this thought arose of, no one's going to understand this. This is far too subtle. How could anybody possibly grasp this experience that I just been through, this mind had just been through, this a radical transformation? And so I began to, shortly after that, I remembered the story of the Buddha, and I was like, oh wow, is this what's going on here? Is this what this experience is? Because he pointed to that. He said that this was far too subtle for anybody to understand. And there I was, returning back, being washed up on the shore on that beach, and thinking, this is far too subtle. But then, after quite some time, after many months, and finding the whole thing very peculiar and funny, this world and what's going on in it, I began to get inspired about, well, I think that there are other people, because there'll be people like me. Like, I was so filled with searching. I was desperate. I was so thirsty for needing to understand what was going on, to wanting to be free from the suffering of the world. This has been going on all of my life for 25 plus years. I thought, well, for sure, I know there are other people just like me, because they're all my friends. Actually, even in that cult that I was in, the Goenka cult, they'll all still be stuck in there. And I've experienced something. I've experienced what the Buddha was talking about when he said that there was anatta, the 3 characteristics of the world, that there is change, anicca, there is dukkha, unsatisfactoriness and suffering, and anatta, that there is no truth to the self. And the self is not real in the way that we think it is. And there I'd had this profound experience of that. I'd been on this quest because I was never able to experience, what did that really mean? No self. What was the Buddha talking about 2,600 years ago? And all these people had referred to that and talked about it. Eckhart Tolle talks about this. And I couldn't grasp it. And here it was now as a living experience, a daily living experience. I could no longer believe in the self. It had all flipped. I was like, oh, how can anybody believe in themselves? Before I was thinking, how could anybody understand or experience no self? Now I was like, well, I don't even understand how you can believe in yourself. There's clearly no truth to this. It's just not real. You aren't real. Isn't it obvious? No. Everybody's like telling me they're all thinking it's obvious that they are real. It's hilarious how it can all change and flip around. So after that, that's when I started to run awakening retreats. So I started putting on 7-day awakening retreats where it was a fusion of meditation and body practices and DMT and basically the sacred medicines. So over 7 days, taking people through a process where they were given an opportunity to awaken, because clearly the meditation and the grounding in the body was a real key. But then they were going to need a booster rocket. They were going to need something to really push themselves through. And that's where the DMT comes in from the toad medicine. And so obviously not working with anybody with those doses, like that's ridiculous, the kind of dose that I had. See, that's what's very amazing with all of this. The amount of DMT is what affects the experience. You don't need to have a crazy dose like that. That's actually completely inappropriate. And unfortunately, there are people in the world offering that, and I do not recommend that at all. It's best to not work with those people. This is not something, as you can tell, to play with. This is not a trifling thing. This is not a small thing. This is the biggest thing in the whole world. DMT is the intergalactic, interdimensional gateway. It is the thing that tears the fabric of the universe apart. There's nothing else like this. So you can't mess with this. You can't play with it. This is not something that I'm recommending that you go and do at all. So, however, in a very specific kind of environment, I began sharing this and teaching this. So that's what this 6th step is about. And obviously, I'm not telling anybody here. I'm not telling you to do this. I'm not telling you to awaken like this. I'm not even telling you to, if you do go through that awakening process, to start teaching. That might not be appropriate. There are plenty of people in the world, and obviously not that many, who have awoken to these truths, and they're not going around teaching it. They're just content. That 5th step is each step of this 7-part process could be enough. If you just want to stay at the 1st step, that's great. If you want to go to the 2nd step, that's great. If you want to just go to the 3rd step and experience joy, wonderful. You don't have to keep on progressing. Each one, it's like a Russian doll. It's like layers of an onion. It's only if your heart calls for you, or if you receive the messages. Oh, well, what is beyond? Once I've achieved this, once I've gone through this, is there anything more? If there is that level of curiosity, if there is that level of an inner push, an inner yearning, then that is the instigator for taking the next step. It needs to be an authentic arising that, yes, I want to go beyond this. So that's what these 7 steps are. Each one is a totality, a whole life unto themselves, and only if there was the yearning for more. So in my experience of that 5th step, and then also from the story of the Buddha, there is a clear transmission to then go and share that. So presumably, only if one had gone through that 5th step, and only then if there was a message sent, a transmission sent that this is good for you to go and share, would this 6th step be appropriate? Would this 6th step be arising? It would then be a natural arising, fully natural, to then go and share this with the world in whatever way you want. Maybe you would just run some groups. Maybe it would be a small teaching. Maybe it would be just with your friends. Maybe you'd start a massive movement. Maybe you'd make your own cult. The whole thing is a joke, remember? Why not? This is a playground. This is a game here to be played. And if you've had an authentic experience of fully awakening, and you've got integrity, and you actually want to make a difference and assist people in this crazy world that's full of suffering, then why not create your own movement, your own group, if that's what you want to do? Or maybe you want to make some films, or maybe write some books, or whatever. Maybe you don't even want to do any of that. Maybe the awakening process was completely enough, and all you wanted to do after that was to meditate, just sit there in the cave, under a tree, in your room, or just enjoy life now. Just go about your business, your private business, and therefore you wouldn't need to do the sixth step. So that's what this part is about. This step is about if there's a natural inclination to take the awakening process and share it with the world. And that's what we're doing right here. So if you've been enjoying this, it's because of that transmission that I received to share this with you and share it with the world. After this, one more episode that completes these 7 steps in the awakening, or in the living life fully process.